Record.
Okay.
Right.
So we made it to week 11. So if you're playing along in real time, you will have all of your modules created and all of your articulate files are done. I've been kind of doing it in real time myself right now because I just launched my fall 2020 version of the course for, we have some students who do a summer academy on our campus. So I've started moving my own personal deadline for having content up to mid-July because it means that I've got kind of a test pool of students that can get in there and do it, and we can uncover any issues. And these are students that are working closely with our faculty on campus. So it's been a good system for having a couple of dozen students through the program a little ahead of the full campus. And last year we uncovered a couple of problems with that. And I think, this year it'll be even smoother than it was before. So I was busily working through the weekend, testing modules. What I've learned is that I test it on my laptop and I keep the articulate file open on my desktop. And so that way, as I was uncovering errors, I could go fix it. And doesn't mean I still have to go through the thing of publishing and uploading and testing again, but it was pretty quick. And I also took the opportunity to have my son, who's 11, do some of the testing as well. So that way, having a younger person do it who's not familiar with the interface, it's a nice way to test that things make sense and are logical in terms of what do I do next. So having somebody who's fresh to the program works pretty well. So goals for this week are talking through, okay, so what does actual deployment look like after we have all of our content developed? How are we going to communicate with students? And then managing your gradebook and how do you handle what happens next? So if you've purchased the use of one of these programs through a third-party vendor in the past, you're probably aware that they just send you like an Excel template and they say, fill, we need the following fields, and you send them this finished thing, and then they give you access to a portal where you have some control of what happens next. So in this case, we're bringing all of those things in-house. Again, we're working from this booklet that you can download from one of these links. It's in 11 chapters, and we've done one webinar for each. We've done one webinar for each chapter of the book, and so this is week 11. So I want to talk through what the steps are in deployment. So, if you get all your content into that program and it feels like this really big accomplishment, and then really this is the part where this is the place where I feel like I break down emotionally sometimes. Like I just want to be done with this, but you really do have to set aside time for the previewing and the publishing and the uploading to the LMS and testing. And I rarely get it right on the first time. This year I got alcohol done in 2 rounds, but it took a third round to get all of my SPARC content exactly where I wanted it. The good news is I think some of that was, I updated some graphics and I made some mistakes of my own. I did a copy and paste graphic with a bad trigger attached to that graphic, and I had to ultimately go back and fix every single one. So that was a roadblock for me. They also articulate storyline 3. So there's the 2 versions of the software. There's the 360 where they roll out updates as they go, and then storyline 3, which is the one-time purchase. And then every so many months they upload a package of new stuff. And they had actually just uploaded some new content related to accessibility, and it's all really good things moving forward. But I think, because of the timeline and me trying to get through things very quickly, and then it was like having to learn some new stuff. But I think ultimately it was user error on my end, that students who are regularly relying on assistive technology will actually find it easier to go through the classes, that they've actually fixed some content from that perspective. So I usually recommend previewing. If it's a complicated slide, I'll preview just that slide. And then after I've previewed all the complicated slides in a scene, I'll preview the whole scene. And I try to save myself some time there. I gambled this year, and I just went ahead and published and put it into the LMS. And that was, I maybe wasted some of my own time thinking I had it all right on the first try, but you know, optimist, I guess. So I should have known it was 2020 and it was not going to go smoothly. So I upload everything into my LMS and then I test it in the LMS. There's a student view. We're going to switch over and I can show you what BlackBoard looks like on the back end. I'm sure that the systems are parallel for Canvas and Moodle. And then you have to upload your students in LMS, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. I think I have a whole slide where I want to have, like, I was going through this last week because I was thinking I have to do these steps myself, and then I'm like kind of jogging my memory with that asterisk. You have to get the students into the LMS or have some process with that, and I can share with you what my process is. You have to let the students know that they have to take the course, and so that might be a whole set of steps that's going to be unique to your campus as well. Then you have to make sure that the students take the course, and then there's certainly going to be questions along the way from students. And then if you're implementing a mandate for completion, and on my campus, we do put a hold on student accounts that bars them for registering for the next semester. We don't do anything that impedes them during the add drop period, and that was something that a former vice president of student development felt very strongly about, and I think it makes sense that with our incoming freshmen, we don't want to put too many roadblocks in front of them. So, you know, we can identify that they haven't completed yet. So I usually use, we do kind of a suggested deadline of the first day of classes, but then we do a hard deadline of the last day of add drop period as our completion date. So I like kind of having deadlines that are connected to, you know, some dates that other people on campus are in control of. And so this just fits into the process. It's not a decision I have to make each year. Add drop fits within our first mini or the first 5 weeks. And so that gets me to the end of September. And it just feels like a comfortable time to do things. So the things that you can control, I think, in terms of the deployment process, and I actually just tossed my little scrap piece of paper that had all my notes that are related to this. I tend to make these little scrap tables for myself where I can kind of cross things off as I go through them. So for each module, is the content complete? It feels good to cross that off. Have I previewed it? Yes. Have I published it? And then what I found myself doing this time is that once I knew how many slides, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago when we talked about publishing, like I publish so that completion of the content is based on the number of slides viewed. And so I take the number of slides in the module. I actually add a slide at the end of each scene or each module that says, you've completed this module, because then I've got a screenshot thing that I can ask students to capture and send me if there's any breakdown in technology communication. But then what I do is I set it to publish on one slide less. So I write that number in the publish column. So that way, as I'm kind of going through and doing things in kind of rapid succession, or, you know, going back and fixing things, and I have 1,000 other things on my mind, I have that number right in front of me. And some of these things, like the publishing part, like once you know how many slides are in there, I don't know. I mean, I feel like to get to the content complete part, you're putting in hours and hours and days, but you can publish, you know, I can publish 4 modules in under 15 minutes. So there are some columns you can complete faster, but then it's the upload and the test, and then maybe you're kind of coming back. So sometimes the first time through is a check mark and the next time through is an X, but you know, that's my own system. And I just kind of offer that up as a way of keeping track, because there are a lot of steps. You're repeating them. You know, if you do as I do and you put each module up as a separate piece of content on your LMS, you know, it's really easy to lose track of all of the different pieces. So I have found that the scrap piece of paper on the blotter area of my desk is really what helps me get through those parts and keep myself organized. I know I don't know if we've talked a lot about pre-post testing. I don't have a pre-test at this point. I had one in my IRB queue at school this year. And I was actually going to pre-test based more on the content that they recalled receiving about alcohol and sex education in their K-12 experience. And I was going to actually look at it in kind of a socio-ecological view. You know, and I don't know, I guess more, maybe not entirely, you know, did they learn stuff from their school system? Did they learn it from a church or other community group leader? Did they learn it from an athletic coach? Did they learn information from like older cousins and siblings that had already gone to college? Did they learn it from parents? And really just kind of looking at a broad perspective. Ultimately, I decided to put a kibosh on it for this year just because I felt like the extra stress that students are under right now is just not fair to put one more thing in front of them. I do post-test within BlackBoard. I have 10 questions for both my alcohol course and my sexual violence course. They connect with the learning objectives for each of those modules. I believe that I have put them, the questions that I use, I've put into the technical manual. So you have access to those and you can see what I've used and, you know, go ahead and use them or make up your own based on that. What I found is that for me, it's better to use the test tool that's built within BlackBoard, which is my campus LMS, just because the metrics that it offers me are much more robust. And so it just makes sense to do it that way. The other nice thing too is that's a part that you can export a test from one semester's course and import it into the next one. So it's one way to have one easy task in terms of getting things up and running. I also use a Microsoft form that just asks students for feedback about their experience taking the class. And I'm not sure if I've included that or not, and I'm happy to share those with students. And Microsoft Forms can be embedded, so there's like a copy and paste in Microsoft Form, and I just copy and paste it. And again, so it's one of those things where it's not a whole lot of extra work. Now that I've got the form created, I just make a new copy of it, change the name to the new semester, and copy and embed the stuff that it says that I should copy and paste into the embed place. So, and I also have something within the LMS in BlackBoard, it's called adaptive release. So students don't see module 2 until they've logged an attempt on module 1 and say, you know, 3, you can't see 3 until you've done 2, you can't see the quiz until you've done 4, and I make it so they can't get access to the form until they've completed the quiz. So it's kind of a last minute thing that they have access to. We actually get pretty good completion rates, and I do tend to tweak year to year based on the feedback from the students. You know, I asked them about, you know, was it too much reading? Was it too much video? What things were new to you? What things were not new to you? And, you know, and there's a couple of, you know, there's some, you know, some Likert kind of scale questions, some multiple choice stuff. And then there's some, you know, short form, you know, do you have any ideas? Are there any things you think, you know, should be included in this kind of content? So that's how I'm kind of gathering data around that. I think, you know, my personal thought is that because this is kind of a first connection with students through the campuses about sexual violence and alcohol, to me, I don't want to waste the time on a true pre and post test, because ultimately we are bringing in students from so many different systems of education that I felt like if I was going to do data collection with a solid end, I mean, we bring in about 1,800 new students a year. That was why I was really thinking I'd rather do kind of this broad perspective overview of what students recall receiving messages on, because most of my students do come from the K-12 public school system of New York State, and I would have actually had a really good data set to kind of go knocking on the doors of state ed with. And I thought, well, geez, if I can find a few more other campuses that can get similar data, maybe we can start to talk about the fact that August 1st is not a good time to start having these conversations with 18-year-olds, but, you know, that's my own personal mission. And, you know, hopefully, you know, as we move through the next couple of years, I'll be able to bring that back. And if anybody's interested in being a pilot test campus, for sure, let me know and we'll pull you into that. There are the things that you have to help students with. And so these are the things that you're gonna need other people on your campus likely to assist you in doing. So how are you gonna add students? With BlackBoard, I can upload a CSV, which is basically an Excel spreadsheet that you just save in a very specific way. And I have a template that I got from my LMS, like the guy, I call him the LMS guru, Chillin. He's like the person who does all of these things. And so I just have a blank form, which is basically first name, last name, email. And then there's like a column where I have to put S for student, because that's how they're going to be a user in the course. So but they have to be in specific columns. And so having that template that I can go back to every single time I do this, because it's not information I need to keep in long-term memory as long as I have that spreadsheet. So like I was mentioning at the start of this, we have a few dozen students who participate in a summer academy on my campus. And so they're in a special program. They have special assistants. So I've actually, this is the second year in a row now that I've launched live for them in July, so that we get those students through when there's a little bit more connection with faculty, so we can support them. We can actually uncover any issues that I haven't uncovered in my own testing. So in that case, I can reach out to that department and say, you know, can you send me an Excel spreadsheet with all this stuff? I personally don't, we use Banner as the database on campus. I don't have access to Banner, but you know, finding the person who does and who can pull that data, it's generally, they seem to be able to pull that content pretty quick. And so I can just upload that. And in this case, because of the summer kind of experience status, what I also do is I add a column to my gradebook once the students are uploaded, and I just kind of code that with a number 1 for that column. So that way, if I ever need to draw a report for that group, I can just sort by that column, and it's really easy to bring that information back to them. I think we will also upload our athletes this year as a separate group before I import the entire incoming class of fall 2020, for the same reason, because if I can upload them as a group before I bring in the whole class, I have that, it's really easy to create that new column and everybody gets a number in that column, and I can just kind of knock that out in a few minutes, versus if I upload everybody and then I have to go find the 100 students that are athletes and put that number in the column. It's a much more time consuming task to take care of. So, and then what happens is when, like I have a contact in admissions who is my go-to person for getting the spreadsheet. So I've already been in contact with her. Normally we would be launching this class on the first Monday of August. And so I'd reached out to her earlier, I guess maybe it was the end of last week, and said, you know, I'm on track to launch August 3rd. Do you think you can pull me a list of students July 29th or July 30th? And I can get it uploaded over the weekend. Mostly because it's honestly, it's like a 5-minute task, but having kind of that little wiggle room of knowing that in theory, we would have an email that would be in our communication system scheduled to go out first thing Monday morning. It'd be nice to have everything in place, because there is, in 1900 students, there are usually a few early birds who just jump right onto the task. So as it turns out, everything is kind of pushed back in the queue because they're doing more communication in different ways this year. So I've put in the request. I'll probably get those student names, and then after that, I'll probably reach out around August 15th to see if there's any late admits. Those ones I might enter manually one by one, depending on how many students there are. But once I upload that big, huge list of like the 1,800 plus students, the system will recognize and it'll find like I think it's 54 students I've put in already. Like it'll identify those duplicates, and it won't double register a student for a course. It fixes that on the end. It looks like there's an error, but really it's doing the right thing. So I think those are all the things on that slide. So it is kind of knowing ahead of time. I feel like this is another one of those things that in the very first year of doing this, I was still like rushing through August, and I remember it was all of a sudden it was like somebody put like some hurdles up that I had to do to like, Emily, these are local mandates that we do these online courses for students, and now suddenly you're telling me you're gonna have a hard time giving me these spreadsheets. But like now it's a pretty simple process. But the first year it did take some time and some doing, and I had to pull in, you know, my VP to talk to the other VP and make it all work. So, you know, I trust you to know your campus and how it functions and the communication and how people, you know, I think sometimes there's like people are really great about holding student data confidentially. So I think it's just a matter of, if you're not somebody who's normally asking for confidential information in that kind of a way, to, you know, let them know that this is a legitimate request, that there's a, you know, good reasons how it's being used. I don't know, maybe you have a help desk ticket kind of system on your campus where you just put in the request and it magically shows up in your inbox. So, you know, again, I trust you to know your campus, but it might take a little bit more oomph the first year as you start a new system. So how do our students learn that they have to take this course? We have a BlackBoard portal page for all our incoming students that has a checklist of all the things they have to do, like do health forms and take online orientation, and I don't even know. Those are the ones that are on my radar that I know that they need to know. I'm sure there are like deposits and all kinds of deadlines and dates and stuff. So we, right from the beginning, students know that they'll be taking, I think our campus likes to refer to this as the alcohol and safety course. And that's what it's listed. And then we just put kind of in parentheses after that about when we anticipate that going live. So one of the last tasks I have on my list is to send our web administrator the direct link to the BlackBoard course so that she can update that to-do list item on that Monday so that it filters students directly over to the BlackBoard page, because they're still kind of learning the navigation of those things. And I think that is one of the additional things that we end up taking on by teaching a class before students are even on campus. Is this is for some of them the first time they're going to be utilizing the LMS, and so we will ultimately end up handling some questions that are just them learning to navigate the system, and that's a great opportunity. You know, you have to embrace it as a great opportunity that we're supporting kind of the rest of the campus through this, that we're, you know, they're going to ask, these students are going to ask these questions, and we just might be the first point in the system where they become aware of this stuff. So one of the best pieces of advice I got from my BlackBoard administrator was that sometimes there's some questions that students will email you and you have to just let them sit for a few hours. Like I think, you know, the customer service side of student affairs is we do tend to jump on stuff, but from the IT, from the technology kind of, you know, I don't know, school of thinking pedagogy is sometimes you have to let students see if they can figure it out for themselves. And there are ultimately a handful of things. And so I'll check in with students, you know, at some point. You know, I tend to skim emails at night for good or for bad, but I think for me, it's also, if I've got the bandwidth to deal with it, I'd rather get the easy things done that don't take a lot of bandwidth done at night so that I can go in fresh in the morning. And sometimes you'll just pick up on the tone that somebody's super anxious and that they need that support right now. I've also learned that you can be like, you know what, I see your thing. Don't panic. I'll send you a good response in the morning when I get to the office. You know, you should have something for me by 9:30. And I've found that often de-escalates without having to like rip me off my couch and put me in front of a computer at 10 o'clock at night, but still kind of balance all of like that. You know, you want to help students, like we work in these jobs because we love our student contact. And so it balances all of those things. So I usually try to have the course live the Friday before I launch on a Monday. We do send a blast email out to all students. I'm not sure if I included that, but I'm happy to share what our letter looks like, so you can use it as a template in developing your the higher level, the higher ranking officer, the highest ranking officer that's willing to sign off on that letter is probably a great thing. It's for us, it's our vice president of student development, but we got a new president on my campus within the last 2 years. So I see where, you know, there's all of that. I don't want to call it politics, but, you know, as presidents are learning their role and their place on campus, where do they want to sign their name and where do they not want to sign their name? So I think for us, you know, VP of Student Development is great, but if you have a president who's really supportive of these initiatives, I think it makes sense to do the ask to see if they're willing to sign off. And then if not, ask them to make the choice of who they'd like to sign off on it. And we've done that with some of our video choices. You know, I'll invite the president to come into the studio to record one of the videos, but if not, you know, who is it that she would like to have be on camera speaking those messages to students? So I feel like that's a nice way to balance it out. So then after you do that initial thing, so for me, it goes out on Monday. I would say we probably have 10% of our student body that just jumps in and does it and has it done. And when I looked today, I've already had one student from our summer group already complete, and which makes, honestly, that feels really good because it means that somebody got through the whole thing without any issues. So that's a good thing. So I tend to my routine once I launch is to kind of pop in the morning and see what's going on. Ultimately, I do end up getting a handful of emails, and I did end up creating a separate, we call it a sponsored account on my campus. So it's a separate email account, and I will flag, I do keep in my own inbox, you know, I tell students, you know, if you have a question about this, put this in the subject line. And I have one of those, I don't know what you call it, one of those tools in my inbox that anything that has that in the subject line goes into the folder, and anything that else that shows up, I put into the folder. And I just, you know, in the morning, I look at it. After lunch, I look at it, you know, maybe 15, 20 minutes before I head home for the day, I look at it, just to kind of compartmentalize, because it is one of those things that you can switch task yourself into, you know, oatmeal brain when you first launch, because they'll have so many questions. So being able to kind of put that on your calendars, like it's going to take this much time each day. I do feel like at this point, like I do have a very part-time administrative assistant. And so this is one of the things that this is the year that we're going to be starting to transition her into. So I'll be CCing her into the responses to students, and we'll kind of decide, you know, what are the ones that she's capable of responding to. So by having it in that separate email account that can be feeding into both of our inboxes that we can both be watching, should help. It'll take a little bit off of me, but I feel like it's been a little loosey-goosey the last couple of years. So I really wanted to smith it out, but I think at this point we're in pretty good shape in terms of moving forward and having it be streamlined and having it contained. So it's, you know, there's some chaos, but it's a controlled chaos. Once I figured like 24 hours, and it is interesting, like the email conversation really drops in the 24 hours before they move into campus. I'm not sure how that's going to play out this year. And this year we'll be doing all of our orientation online, or 98% of it online. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out as a different feel in terms of how students are reaching out and when they're reaching out about completing this. But, you know, in a standard year when we're moving 1,800 students in on the, you know, orientation week for new students, you know, there's generally nobody is touching the course in the 24 hours before they leave home to, I mean, there are the handful of ones that feel like get the message and kind of misinterpret as that it must be done before they get here. And they'll be like emailing you at midnight and be like, it's okay, you'll still get your key, you'll still be allowed in the building. Just, you know, do your best to finish up, you know, once you're back on campus. And then I don't push out any new reminders or information to students during the rest of that orientation week or during the first week of classes. I think there's enough anxieties and worries, and, you know, I feel like there's that balance of, you know, some students certainly are going to benefit from the prodding, but other students are already feeling overwhelmed by anxiety. And I don't, you know, I'd rather err on the I don't want to overwhelm the anxious, and I'm willing to kind of have to, you know, means I'll have to do more prodding later. So there's kind of that break. But what I do during that time is I print off, I can export my gradebook to Excel. So then I got a lot of abilities to data manipulate. And so I work with my residence life staff, and I print out a list of names of students who have not started the course. Because this is not a course for grades, my director of registrar felt that this was not a FERPA violation to include my resident assistants to just have those face-to-face conversations. So they get a list of students that they can follow up with, and we just kind of work from that. There are some years I've done postcards and we've printed off labels, and then we have to figure out which building they're in, and it's a lot of labor and person hours to make those things happen. And so I've ultimately decided that it's not necessarily worth the time to do that the face-to-face conversations of kind of working with RAs to be like, go through this list of names, anybody that's on your floor, that's in your quad, that's in your space, I need you to just touch base with them and let them know that that they need to have that and finish that up and get moving on that course. And then ultimately what I end up is I have 10 parts. I have 4 modules of alcohol and a quiz, and 4 modules of sexual violence and a quiz. So I have 10 pieces, and I have them labeled thus. And that is one of the tips and tricks I have learned. So I call my alcohol course Party Science. So Party Science Module 1 is what it's named, and you're going to see this in a minute. I'll show you what my course looks like. And it's in parentheses part 1 of 10, because we had there was a handful of students who would be like, I did part one. I'm like, no, you did alcohol part one. You didn't do sexual violence part one. So trying to be very specific with that, that did eliminate a lot of emails. So that was like a win for my assistant and I. We're like, wow, that saved us so many emails. So what I do is I kind of do a countdown. So like I said, I use the end of ad drop, which is always a Friday. And so for the 2 weeks prior, that first Monday, 2 weeks prior, anybody who has not started, who does not have a start for the very first module of alcohol gets an email from me of like, hey, you know, I noticed you haven't done this. And then I copy and paste the letter that they received at the beginning of the semester. And then the next day I do the same thing for number 2. So if the student hasn't started, ultimately they end up with 10 emails from me sitting in their inbox. And if they're only missing 1 or 2, then it's, you know, they're getting them towards the end. And I add in there's like, you know, it's not too late. You can still do this. You can probably do this in 5 to 10 minutes a night. Just, you know, click the link every day. You get an email and you can finish this up on time, and it's not a big deal. And then let's see, so this is where the next part gets. So my campus, like I mentioned, does employ holds as, you know, as the mandate. And what we have found over the years, and I think this is something that we will probably talk, again, this is a semester that I really don't know what it's going to look like, but what we found is that when we were putting holds on accounts, and my administrative assistant asked to manually add every single hold on. So we really, part of like sending out all those emails is to really get the number of accounts that she has to put holds on to as small as possible. I work with our registrar's office because registrar sends out an email campus-wide to all students, letting them know what holds they do have on their account. So knowing when they're going to put into motion whatever they need to put in the motion to draw those individual reports for students, to me, that's our deadline for getting holds on. And then it's usually mid to late October. So October, it works out pretty well for us. End of ad drop is generally the last Friday of September, although, you know, sometimes it's like October 1st or 2nd. And then we've got 2 or 3 weeks to figure out which students need holds, and we can get those put on accounts. And, you know, maybe she's doing 15 or 20 holds a day and just kind of, you know, working through the list. What we have found, I think the upside of her putting on the manual holds is that she has noticed that rarely, once in a blue moon, are we the only hold on a student account, which I think is interesting. So, and I've talked about this with my new student services director about the fact that not completing this course might actually be a canary in the gold mine for a student who is struggling. And maybe we're sitting on a piece of data that might be a little bit more important to share sooner rather than earlier, that the students who are persisting at not even starting and completing, maybe they need a check-in from somebody more than their RA, and how do we want to look at addressing that over the long haul, or maybe we want to pilot that. So thinking through what are the systems we have in place on campus already where we know freshmen are connecting with faculty, and looking at that. So, you know, that I think was going to be the natural next step for us in implementing and deploying this on our campus. And I think this will be the year that we maybe are pausing through that a little bit more. So I know sometimes campuses have shared that they have a really hard time convincing folks that a hold should go on an account, but I think that's a piece of information you might be able to use to your advantage, is that it's not necessarily putting a hold, but it might be helping you come up with an early warning system that you can capture students. I would say right now, one of the things we're also dealing with are students who are readmits to the campus who have a hold on their account because they didn't complete the course the first time they entered into the campus. And so, you know, tracking those down and working with those students. But, you know, it's, again, it's one of those places that it happens. So, you know, data is good if we use it for good things. So I think that is absolutely that. Once we get to the point where we're adding holds on students, I do a thing. So, and I don't have this piece of information about Canvas or Moodle, but when I send emails directly through the BlackBoard system, it does not, I get a copy of the email to my inbox as the instructor of the course, but I do not have like a carbon copy situation where I have a list of every student who received that email. It just, I can kind of sort of like make me a list of all the people who haven't finished module 2, and I'm going to email those folks. And so ultimately what I have found in the last couple of years is that once the hold goes on their account, I actually download the gradebook into an Excel spreadsheet, and I use a mail merge to send every student a unique email that lets them know the status of every single module, and all of those pieces of information that they need to know. Again, that there's a hold on your account, there's still time to remedy this because I'm sending you this email mid-October. Course registration isn't going to be for another couple of weeks. You have plenty of time to finish this. Here's where, maybe you did start and you forgot, or maybe there was a module that maybe the information just didn't connect between your machine and the server, so I lay all of that out for students. And that ends up being a really handy thing for me, because then I do have a sent item for every single student in my mailbox. So inevitably I'm going to get an email of like, nobody ever told me this. And I can pull up the email in my sent item to, student John Doe. It's like, John Doe, here's a copy of the email I sent you on October 15th that laid out all the specific things. Let me know if this email doesn't answer the question you just sent me. And so, you're kind of in that space of, you have a backup plan. And because I find for myself, when we get to that point, I am much more conscious of kind of like my emotions rising of like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to answer this question again. I've put in a lot of effort to get you to finish this course and you're feigning no knowledge of it. And that can feel frustrating. So having a system in place where it kind of takes that off, like, here, I have proof that I did contact you on this point and you chose to miss that. So that's, let's own responsibility. And again, I think within the teachable moments that we have with students as they're transitioning into campus, it is that. And so to kind of step myself, sit back and be like, okay, this is really where it fits in. It's not, they're not, they're angry at the growing pain opportunity. And then it's my job to facilitate them through the growth of that growing pain. So this is the email I was talking about. So pay attention to that day. Then you've got an easy way to sort through your sent items, or maybe, probably if I was smart, I would just, as soon as I sent them, go into my sent items and create a folder and just pop them all in there. But usually, you can, for me, I can search the username and it comes right up, and that, because it's the one time that I've reached out to that student directly from my email folder. So let's talk about, so that's kind of like the communication portion of students. So it probably sounds overwhelming. I mean, I feel like these are all things I learned on the fly. Like once I launched, it's like, oh, I'm going to need an email that communicates this. And like, oh my gosh, when am I going to send that? So I feel like there's a lot of, like, there's the steps that I do now, and we have a system. I think the other thing that we have contemplated doing, my administrative assistant and I, is having a web page where we can put these dates on it, so that if because occasionally there's the parent or caregiver that's reaching out, so we can, to be able to redirect and say, like, here's the timeline, like, this is when the original email went out to your student, this is when reminders were sent out, this is the information, here's how you help interpret. To be able to offer maybe some sample content to parents who are curious about that. I've definitely had some really good conversations with parents, kind of the de-escalation kind, where you're like, whoa, like why is my daughter being forced to take a class about sexual violence predators? I'm like, well, it's not about sexual violence predators. Like, we're talking about bystanders, and, we want students to be prepared to know all of the things, because statistically it's not going to happen to them, but odds are great that they're going to be in a space where a question's going to come up, and we want them to be prepared. So there are parents that, initially come in kind of with guns blazing and being able to be prepared with that. So I think offering some of that on a front page website will, maybe that's the thing I'll be able to address this year under kind of a unique year. So the other part is kind of like just the tracking who's done. So my grade book looks a lot like an Excel spreadsheet. I set up every module to be equal to 100 points. I have columns that I've created that are calculated columns. So they're like sum columns. So I have it set up so that when I open up, I generally have last name, first name. I'm going to show you my grade book today, but I've hidden those columns from view. So it's a little bit harder to kind of wrap your brain around, I think, missing those kind of cues. But I have a module or one column that shows me the SPARC total and then the alcohol total. So ideally, they're going to be at least, if there's 100 points for each module, and then I have this 100-point quiz, so it's not always going to be 500 points, but I know it's going to be at least 410. Hopefully they're getting one question right. But that way, if I have a student who's struggling, or I can kind of just watch things, I feel like just kind of looking in general, I can sort by those columns. I can see where people are getting stuck. If I notice that there's a lot of people who have started, say, alcohol module 3, but are not completing, that kind of gives me a hint there might be something going on. And a couple of years ago, that was like the ultimate hint, was that there's all these students that were not getting through module 3, and I emailed them all and said, hey, I'm noticing this anomaly. You're somebody who's caught up in it. What's, can you tell me what browser you're using? And ultimately, I think we tracked it down to like a Mac Safari browser issue, but we were able to get some students unstuck because I was kind of looking at the big picture view of what the gradebook columns were giving me. Like I said, I created a column for my summer academy and athletics. And then I also have a column that I put in for a hold. So once we start applying holds to accounts, I put a number, every student who gets a hold on their account gets a number 1. And then we just take those, we change those ones back to zeros once the hold's been taken off. And like I mentioned, my administrative assistant's part-time. So once or during the registration period, if I have somebody else in the building take a hold off, I change that number to a number 2, because she also maintains a manual list to just kind of have a checks and balance system. So that 2 tells her that the hold was removed and we just want her to cross it off on her list. So we've gotten creative and clever over the years with how we figure all these things out. The other way that I do the grade book too, so 100 means that the student finished it. It's basic, it shows up as a checkbox, but when you kind of click on it, you see the 100. If I have to put in an override, this is my own coded system that I do. Like if I have a student that completes in my room, because maybe they were struggling. I think one of the other secrets I have learned too is I do have an extra computer in my space. And so if a student is struggling, I always invite them over. Now, again, this is a place where we're not going to have that option this year, but as in the future, if things return to some kind of experience that I would call normal, inviting students is like, hey, I know it works for sure on this extra computer in my office. I have office hours this afternoon. Why don't you come down? Generally, they fix it themselves. I have fixed so many computers that way, but ultimately I find that the students who do take me up on those offers are students who are outside the standard typical 18-year-old freshman. I've met a lot of middle-aged women who come in and they have and I'm not a Mac user, so it's always like these really great conversations because they're bringing in some new iPad that they got to go to college. They barely understand how to use the iPad. I don't know how to really use it at all, but I understand the course. And between the two of us, we figured out, we have a really great conversation, and I've made some really good links with folks through that. So those have been really great. I've also had some really great moments with international students, and it's just, so I would say the ones who actually make it through to my office are really fabulous students that I would have missed learning their names and meeting them. And so it might feel like a lot to put that out as office hours, but it's only enriched my life and my experience on campus. So don't be scared of doing that. Sometimes I'll have them send me a screenshot. I prefer that what they do is do it on their laptop and send me a photo from their phone, and I'll ask them to put a Post-it with their name on it in that picture, so that way I know that it only could be them. And I try to pay attention to what the image is, and I do save all of those emails in a folder. I've never had anybody try to take a bunch of screenshots for lots of different people. I've had students send me stuff. Like there was one time the first year, and the student was saying it's not working, and it's like, did you close all the other windows? Let's make sure you're not overtaxing your computer. And they sent me a screenshot, and I could clearly see that they were watching Netflix, because it was, I could see it, like the little icon in the bottom of the picture they sent me. So I was able to reply back is like, why don't you turn off Netflix and try it and see if that fixes it? And ultimately that fixed it. So you can learn a lot just from the screenshot situation. You can do a lot of troubleshooting, but again, that's why I built in those extra slides at the end of every module, because then I know for sure they only got to that screen by completing all of the content. So I feel confident that I can give them the pass through that module. But by putting the 95, I'm coding that's how they got that, and then it allows them to get on to the next module. I've occasionally asked them to send me a written summary. I said, you don't have to use full sentences, but the nice thing about when you are so well versed with all of the content on every slide, you generally know if they're telling telling you stuff that they have actually witnessed or not. I had one once tell me that there was stuff about date rape drugs, and I was like, no, there's no mention of date rape drugs in the course, so I need you to, complete that, or, we can talk on the phone. I've also put in some overrides for other reasons. I've had survivors reach out and we skip them through some of the content, or I did one the other day. We had a student who was a readmit and he still didn't have access back into BlackBoard because there was like a handful of things. And so I was like, what are you doing for the next 10 minutes? And I just did it over the phone with him. And so, sometimes you just have like those moments as well. And then, like I said, tech support, plan on having some extra office hours. You'll be happy if you go ahead and just block out some time on your calendar to handle emails. If you block out an hour every morning, you'll never probably need that much time. But, if you do, it's there. So I'm going to stop the share of my PowerPoint. I see that there's something in the chat. Oh, somebody got called in by the dean. Let me just quickly show you what my window looks like. Let's see. So this is my side of BlackBoard. So I have a README first for directions. I have some notes. I have a note now for Mac Safari users. I have some information about using assistive technology. That is stuff that I pulled from the Articulate website. And then what I want them to do if they've experienced an error, and this is the new thing I'm doing this year where I intend to start putting frequently asked question content there, so they can, like, again, if I get like that 9:30 at night email and it's something I know I've already answered, I can direct them to this section and they can get unstuck, and it's not going to take a ton of time for me. And then I have, like I said, I call TRAC party science on my campus. This is all so I'm seeing all of these things, and I can come up into here and I have a student preview mode, and I have previewed everything, so you can't really see my adaptive release, but here's all the content again. So you do have to scroll down. I have found that sometimes that's the answer to some questions, is they'll be like, I finished it. I'm like, no, you need to scroll down. You didn't see the last one that opened up. So if I click one of these, it'll just launch right in place. It's telling me I've already done this once, and I am tracking that this year to see how many students repeat content. And it takes a second because it's pulling it down from the server on my campus, but then it pulls me right into the content. And so this is what the students are going to see when they start going through. Welcome to the Oneana Online Alpha. But I'm going to turn that off. So that's, it's pretty simplistic. It's not very whiz bang, but I think for, especially now that we are a campus that is predominantly using BlackBoard to deliver content for our fall semester, I think it'll be less of a, a different thing. It lays everything out. I have hidden a number of things out. BlackBoard offers all of these things by default, and I just have hidden them because I don't want to overwhelm students. And this is my grade center area, and these are all what would be called a smart view. So no PS4 means that this is, if I click this, it's going to return me a list of every student who has not started Party Science Module 4. So I set all of those things up. BlackBoard does allow me to export out what's called a course cartridge. So I've uploaded all of my new modules this year, but what I also did was I went to my spring 2020 course and I exported that and imported it in. So some of the specific things that I've tweaked with my gradebook, like the README first for directions thing, all of those things I can just copy and paste in that way. So it does save me a little bit of time. It's just a matter of like dragging things around and putting them in order. So when I highlight, I can move things up and down for them. So in the grade center, like you said, it looks very much like an Excel spreadsheet. These little slashes mean that the students don't, those marks, they only just get to see what's complete. But like one of the things to me that's interesting is I can sort by last access. So I can see that I've already got a handful of students that are starting to log in and take a look. So like this 970 tells me that I've got a student who's already totally completed the class. I've got a student here who is completed both modules, but not logged an attempt on a quiz. So having all that information at hand is kind of convenient. So being able to sort by columns. And again, I've only got 54 students in here, but I have a column for each module of content. A check mark means that it's finished. The information went, means that they downloaded that SCORM packet that Articulate created, and the SCORM packet sent back a complete signal that came through. This tells me that it's not complete. So potentially the student might actually be in the course right now, or they downloaded it just to see what was going on and then ultimately didn't complete. So they're somewhere between slide 1 and slide 4. I think there's 5 slides in that module. And that's not too uncommon. So, like sometimes I'll come here and I would sort by completion. So like if I saw like only 2 completes and 12 of these little, pie chart hourglass things, then I know I've got a problem in that space. Like, why is that trending as somebody who are not finishing? So, and like here, I have a 1 in the column for all my summer academy students. If there's a hold, I've already got a column created for that, although we won't use that column for some period of time. So if I needed to, send an email to everybody who was missing a specific thing, I can just kind of click all of that. It highlights that. If I just wanted to, say that I want to just say, hey, thank you for finishing the course, I could click those things. And when I click email, I can do selected users, and then I get something that looks like an email browser. And then I have all my emails from previous years in one big large Word document. And I just copy and paste in the specific content that I need to send out to students. So this part, is pretty manageable once, I think, figuring out how to utilize it, and odds are good as we have more and more colleagues who are utilizing these technologies for online classes. If you're not already comfortable with it, you probably have a lot of faculty who have done the big heavy lift in the last semester and are going to be able to help or offer suggestions about managing and doing all of this content. So I think that's all of the new content I have for today. I see that I have my little question camel here. So I'm going to turn off, let me turn off my share and just kind of, I think Professor Kim, I think you're the only one who made it to the end this week. So I guess if you've got any questions, I can address those. I guess, Lisa, we can go ahead and stop recording.
Oh, no.